It's time for our weekly off-season Q&A, getting into the NFL draft, trades, off-season, free agency, whatever direction you guys want to go. This is your show. Of course, the big topic of the week, Myles Garrett. Should the 49ers go after Myles Garrett or stay the course with some of those early draft picks? A 49ers insider has an idea of what he thinks the 49ers might do. Coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love our everydayers. Make sure you hit that thumbs up on your way through. Let us know you are here. Welcome to all the new listeners. Stick around with us every day as we break down the 49ers in the draft and every facet of the offseason. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win that first $5 bet, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Just download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. All right, a big topic of the week, Myles Garrett. It's a fun topic because Myles Garrett is making his rounds right now on Radio Row at the Super Bowl, talking about his trade request. And he first of all, Mina Kimes said San Francisco 49ers. And he's like, that's the type of team he wants to go to, right? And Myles Garrett's not the type of guy to make a lot of waves. And it was really interesting hearing him talk with Mina Kimes and then Rich Eisen. And he might have been on some other podcasts, some other shows. But I caught those too. And he's such a laid back dude that it doesn't sound like he's trying super hard, and he's not going to like be too much of a squeaky wheel for the Browns. Does that hurt his ability to actually go somewhere? But basically, a good team with good quarterback. And Mina Kimes said, yeah, I've seen you photoshopped in the Bills and named 4 or 5 teams. And he was like, yeah, that sounds about right. So he basically made it sound like if he had a short list of teams, the 49ers have a pretty good chance of maybe being on it. He didn't quite put it that way, but he definitely didn't shoot down the idea of the San Francisco 49ers potentially being a team that he's on after seeing his uniform photoshopped onto it by fans out there. And look, people have been photoshopping Myles Garrett onto a 49ers uniform for 8 years now, for his entire career, since before the NFL draft. So this is nothing new. Matt Mayoko, though, Croc, basically said, essentially what we said. Like, it's in the 49ers DNA to check in on something like this. When there is a big-time difference-making player available, they're going to be involved in it, right? And that's basically what Mayoko said, and that's kind of what we've talked about with the 49ers. I'd be shocked if they don't at least check in and see if this is something they can pull off, whether they're able to pull it off or whether in the end they want to pull it off. That's maybe a little bit of a different story, but I'd be shocked if they don't at least make contact, or maybe have already made contact with the Cleveland Browns about trying to trade for Myles Garrett. And I've talked about, Croc, how the 49ers have a leg up on this because they're one of those quote unquote contending teams. And they are a team that not only is contending, but also has a much higher draft pick than the Commanders or the Lions or the Bills or the Chiefs or the Eagles. And when you have that you have that much more power, where your first round pick is literally worth 2 of the other team's first round picks, that's really big time bargaining power for the San Francisco 49ers. So if Myles Garrett likes the 49ers are in the NFC. If they want to get him out of the AFC, which is something that is possible, they've talked recently about a Brandon Ayuk trade. So those conversation windows are open between those two teams. So if the 49ers want to do this, I think it's something they could possibly get done and maybe have the best opportunity to get it done just because of where they're drafting this year. And, when you have a bad season in year 6 and 12, whatever, 6 and 11, whatever record the 49ers were this year, there are some benefits to it. And it comes down to the draft, Croc. And so when it comes to that whole conversation and you lay it out that way, is it still the smart move for the 49ers? Because having the 11th pick in the draft also means you could draft a cornerstone player that is on a rookie contract for the next 4 years. You could use that to trade down and get multiple potential starters for your football team rather than sending multiple picks for one player in Myles Garrett. So to you, Croc, does it make sense to stay the course, just finally use some of these high draft picks that the 49ers have, the first time in many, many years that they've been able to draft like they will be able to this year? Or should they flex their muscles and go try to win a stinking Super Bowl in whatever window they have left with the current aging group of San Francisco 49ers and go get someone like Myles Garrett?
As everyone that listens, shout out to all the everyday listeners out there, they know Eric Crocker is a Los Angeles Laker fan. And I watched my Lakers do something this week that was pretty smart by the general manager. And essentially what he did was do it was like he retooled, excuse me, or like did like a quick rebuild. I don't even know what to call it, but trade away Anthony Davis, who's having a terrific season. But it's like, hey, we're going to get Luka Doncic back. So that's a guy who's 25 years old, still in his prime, right? And he can play with LeBron James for the next year or so, or however long LeBron plays for. But once LeBron's out the way, like, Luka, this is your team. And then what they did was they traded Dalton Connect. I like Dalton Connect as a young guy, but they're like, you know what? We're in a win now mode. Essentially what we're saying with the 49ers, right? Like, even though we're trying to revamp for the future, but we are also win now. And they went and got Williams, a big center from the Charlotte Hornets, and traded Dalton away. So now, again, once a guy like LeBron is out the way and Anthony Davis, he's no longer on the 49ers, like, hey, we got our superstar in Luka. We got a big who's a 7'1", 7'2" guy who can run and has a good amount of athleticism. And now it's like, all right, let's build around there. So I say all that to say with the 49ers, what is their plan? And sometimes I think the biggest issue is, at least how it comes off to us, they don't have a plan a lot of times. It's, hey, we'll look into things. We'll see this. Okay, can we do that? But it's like, okay, but what's your plan? And what is your plan to build around Brock Purdy? And I think if it has to be the plan to build around him and add as much guys. And obviously, you think about the money aspect of things. The smart thing to do would be go through the draft. Now, I think it's easier to say, nah, give up pick 11, because it is a coin flip. So, if you're going to be picking at 11, you want to identify someone who's going to help you right now. Come in, he can start, and boom, that's a huge win. But we've seen the 49ers draft several guys in the first round, and I don't even think it's 50-50 with the guys who have excelled or exceeded, not even exceeded, just met expectations. I don't think it's 50-50 with those first round guys. So that's the part where you have to kind of go back and forth with. And I thought about, just Deebo Samuel. You and I, we brought him up. Moving off of Deebo money. Well, shout out to my guy Rob Louder, listener of the pod, and he said, hey, just a heads up, trading Deebo Samuel comes with a $31.5 million dead cap hit. So it virtually makes him untradeable. So it's not
until June 1st. You could go post June 1st, and then you could save some money on it, because there was a restructure with Deebo, so he's not in his normal last year like you would expect, because they did a little restructure of his and I think added void years or whatever it was. But so unless it's a post June 1st cut or a post June 1st designation or a trade, then the 49ers don't save any money by trading Deebo Samuel. So they kind of lock themselves into him until June, basically.
And he also added that he said June 1st trade/cut. He says that would cost the 49ers $10 million, $10.7 million, but it would save them $5.1. So,
yeah.
It makes it hard.
Money, 15 million salary means you save $5 million.
Right. For a guy who essentially seems like he's a movable guy, just based on kind of where he's at, the protection you got this year, and it almost feels like, love Deebo, but I think you can move forward with the combination of Brandon Ayuk, Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings, Jacob Cowing, those guys, and kind of do away with Deebo, but now you can't get him off the book. So knowing that his cap hit is so much and you want to trade for a guy like Myles Garrett, I think there's always a way to kind of maneuver around it, but that Deebo Samuel thing might make things a little bit more tough.
Yeah, the 49ers have already, I think, pulled a lot of levers, and The 49ers already have, and Myles Garrett's current contract is not going to hurt the team that brings him on. It's not difficult to bring in Myles Garrett. The difficult thing is when you trade for Myles Garrett, you probably got to redo do a new contract with him, and maybe even not even this offseason, but at least next offseason, right before, because I think he has 2 years left on his deal. So you're gonna have to do a deal with him pretty soon, and it's going to be a big money deal, and it's going to be more than what Bosa got, right? So it does start to get pretty dicey, and how many of those guys can you pay? And as far as current cap, the 49ers are in a great spot because they keep rolling over big dollars, and that's kind of their MO. But I'm not enough of a cap expert to take you through what it exactly would look like. But at some point, you do Purdy, you bring in Myles Garrett, you're going to start losing guys. And maybe it'll all naturally take care of itself with the way the salary cap continues to go up. You clearly know that Trent Williams is not going to be around for a long time. You know that Christian McCaffrey is probably not going to be around for a long time just because of the position he plays. Debo going into the last year of his deal. So if it's more about 2026, 2027, there's already going to be some natural, I think, contracts leaving the books for the 49ers with the salary cap going up. And could they make that all work still? I don't know. It's a good question. But the smart move, build through the draft and hit on those draft picks. But man, maybe if you don't love the draft, and we've talked about this, Croc, like the guys were scouting for pick 11 in the draft, like pick 5 through 25. There might not be much of a different grade in those guys, and maybe even into the second round. So really interesting year in the draft. And would this be the year to trade a top 11 pick? Because maybe you're not going to get quite that level of player that you might get other years with an 11th pick in the draft. But I think it's almost going to take care of itself, because if you have the opportunity to get Myles Garrett, I just think you do it and then figure it out. And if you can't get him, then you can't get him and you go through the draft. So it'll almost be like, if you can get him, then just do it. That's the way I look at it with Myles Garrett, because I think he could make that much of a difference for your team, for a team that's trying to go out there and win a stinking Super Bowl.
Definitely in the immediate future. And I think that's what the 49ers kind of have to do, because you just mentioned a lot of guys. I'm seeing people being mentioned in the chat. You got George Kittle, you got Fred Warner. Some of these guys are getting a little older now.
Mm-hmm.
And when the 49ers were at their peak, right, 2019 or even 2023, like 2023 season may be the actual peak. And I think as it pertains to having as many all pros playing at a high level like they were, I think it's only going down from here. So you're going to need some other things to kind of, whether it's help like Myles Garrett, Brock Purdy being more experienced, that can help. But I don't know if we'll see a 49er team as strong as 2023, or I don't know how. I don't know how you get back to that.
It'll have to be a new group that helps you get there, because even with the same guys you had in 2023, you're not going to be as good in 2025. It's just the reality of the aging out of some players for the San Francisco 49ers, injuries and some of those things. Next, we're going to get into the chat. What do you guys want to get into here with the offseason? We'll talk NFL draft. I want to drop some draft pick values on you with what the 49ers could do, potentially moving around if they didn't go and trade for someone like Myles Garrett, and a whole lot more next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. What are some of your relationship green flags? We often hear about red flags we should avoid, but what if we focused more on identifying the positive signs in our relationships, those green flags? If you're not sure what they look like, therapy can help you identify them, actively practice them, and even embody that green flag energy yourself. Whether you're dating, married, building a friendship, or just working on yourself, therapy can help you form relationships that love you back. Therapy helps you develop healthy boundaries and improve your communication skills, which is super, super important. It empowers you to set clear expectations and express your needs in relationships. Therapy provides tools for managing conflict in ways that strengthen your connections rather than break them down. So discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Croc, I want to talk a little bit of NFL draft here. And I think I have it up here. Yeah, I do. So I'm going to put it on the screen here. And sorry for covering up Croc's face. This is from our friends at Draft Tech, and it kind of highlights where the 49ers are drafting in the NFL draft with the projected comp picks. And right now, the 49ers are picking at pick 11 in round 1, pick 43 overall, round 2. The round 3 pick is number 75 overall, and then they've got their original 4th round pick. They've got no 5th. They got their original 6th and original 7th, but they also have 4 comp picks coming likely. One of those being a 3rd round variety, number 99 overall, and then 2 at the end of round 4, and then 1 at the end of round 7. So the 49ers already have extra draft picks. They have 10 picks this year that they could possibly use, and then they could possibly collect more. Maybe they could use those to trade up or trade around. I don't think they need to select necessarily more than 10 times, even though there's plenty of needs for this San Francisco 49ers roster, as good as it is. There's still plenty of needs and some long-term needs. But I think there's some high-end needs. So I don't, whether it's trade for Myles Garrett, draft the defensive lineman early, an offensive tackle early, they need to flex this 11th pick in the draft to get a difference-making player, not a guard, not an interior offensive lineman, not a one-dimensional run-stopping defensive lineman. They need to get a star of a player here, a pass-rushing demon, a true offensive tackle if they're going to utilize this 11th pick. And maybe Myles Garrett is that guy. And again, I'm totally down with that. But if not, they need to use that and flex it. So I'm okay with moving down a little bit, but I don't think this is not a rebuilding team where you need to move down and collect a whole bunch of 3rd, 4th, 5th round picks, right? Add a 5th round pick, sure. Niners are great drafting in round 5, but they still need to get some impact talent out of this draft. And so let's say they trade down a few picks. Well, they could also trade back up from, say, round 2 or round 3, which I think would be a pretty smart way to go if they did move around, because that way they could get potentially 2 players that they had late 1st round grades on and get one in round 1 and one in round 2. But going by the old Jimmy Johnson chart numbers, Croc, 1250 is how many points the 49ers 11th pick is worth. So let's say the 49ers wanted to go up as high as they wanted to in round 1 and get somebody earlier in round 1 ahead of pick 11. If they took pick 43, their 2nd round pick, 470 points, and added it to that total, then they could get up to maybe pick 6, Las Vegas, maybe even as high as pick 5, potentially. You wouldn't have the extra quarterback tax if you're going up that high. So, once you get out of the top 5, 6 picks, 7, 8, 9, the 49ers can absolutely make that move. They could utilize a 3rd round pick, maybe even their comp 3rd round pick to get up a couple spots with the Carolina Panthers, say at pick number 8, if they wanted to get a guy that they thought was a tier ahead of where they are. And whether it's Mason Graham or whatever player that starts to slide a little bit, they could make that happen. And they could also utilize, let's say, their pick 99, since the 49ers are kind of bad, Croc, right? Would you agree the 49ers aren't great with those 3rd round comp picks? They've had so many of them and they haven't hit on very many.
Which is weird because they've been so good in the 3rd round and especially mid rounds. But yeah, the 3rd round comp picks, they've almost been like borderline terrible.
Yeah, it's funny because they've hit earlier in the 3rd and done pretty well. But once they get to that end of the 3rd round, things have gotten a little bit funky for them. So what if they just said, okay,
we're going to throw out some names? Like names of guys they drafted. I mean, like Trey Sermon, wasn't he one of those? Ty Davis Price, I believe. You had Danny Gray, the receiver.
Various more.
Was Moody one of those comp 3rd rounds? Latu definitely was.
Moody, yep.
Maybe Ambry Thomas. And they got some.
Yes.
They got something in return for like he played early on and really kind of helped them at a key part of a season. So I don't want to just say he was a terrible pick, but you definitely didn't get much like you're getting from a guy that was drafted in that same draft with Diamondor Lenoir corner, who you just had to pay a lot of money to because he's been so good. So yeah, those comp picks in the 3rd round haven't been too kind to the 49ers.
Essentially, once they get past like a certain selection in round 3, things get a little bit funky. And Fred Warner and Pooney were more early 3rd round picks, not the late 3rd round pick variety. Once it gets after pick 90, the 49ers start to have some issues selecting. So let's say they took those extra 100 points with pick number 99.
I was gonna say we have to talk about like there's been a lot of excitement about getting the comp third round picks, right? Because oh man, Robert Saleh gets a head coaching job. Boom, you get a comp third round pick for that. Oh, the guy that went to be a general manager for the Tennessee Titans. Oh, get a comp pick for that. Oh, D'Amico Ryans gets a head coaching job with the Houston Texans. You get a comp pick for that, and they have not been good with those picks.
Exactly. In the chat, they're talking about the 5th round being better than the 3rd round for the 49ers. Just trade all the 3rd round picks for a whole bunch of 5th round picks, and the 49ers might end up being better off. But so let's say the 49ers move back a little bit from 11 and we're able to get, another 100 points of value. Well, then all of a sudden you could take that extra pick that you got from moving back. You could take your pick number 99, which is worth about 100 points as well. You still get a player that's probably got a similar grade to what you were going to take at pick number 11 after moving back a few spots, not crazy far back, but moving back a little bit. And then you could say go up from pick 43 and even get all the way back into the 1st round with those 2 extra picks. You could go from pick 75 and get back into the end of the 2nd round without too much of a problem, and maybe even draft 3 times in the top 50. So there's a lot of ways to skin the cat here when it comes to the draft for the San Francisco 49ers, but I still want impact. So I have no problem moving down in round 1, but I would want to accompany that with moving up. And just looking at it like this and seeing all the values that the 49ers have with their draft selections, the 49ers can kind of work this draft board any way they want to, and they could go a number of directions, up, down, sideways, and even spend a lot of these draft picks in different ways, even if it's not going out and get someone like Myles Garrett. So I expect this to be a year that John Lynch is pretty active. And to be honest, if I had to bet, I'd bet the 49ers don't select at 11, whether it's they trade for a player or just move up or down in this draft.
I like the thoughts of moving down. Like I give up this 2nd round pick, and that's tough because it's kind of a higher 2nd round pick than the 49ers have had in recent years. But if you told me you get up to pick 5, pick 6, and you get my guy Simmons, that left tackle, I know he's coming off an injury, but I wouldn't be mad at that at all. Or give me whoever you think the best left tackle is, right? In a hypothetical world, which so far, from what we've watched, we haven't watched everybody. I like Simmons the most so far. But whoever your top guy is, trading up in around there, kind of, you start to have that opportunity to get a guy like that. And talked about having to revamp some of the elite talent that the 49ers have. Being able to land a big left tackle, that'll kick things off pretty good.
All right, we're going to get into the chat here. I got one more thought there on that idea of moving up for an offensive tackle. I disagree with Croc a little bit, just for one major reason for the San Francisco 49ers in that regard. Let us know what you guys think, what you want to get into here with the rest of this episode. We're going to get into the chat, off-season Q&A style, next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. And the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's just icing on the cake. So download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, an official partner of Super Bowl 59. And with the big game almost being here, there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. You want to play DFS along with the Super Bowl? Prize Picks is the place to do it. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. And here's how Prize Picks works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections at Prize Picks. And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. The more you get right, the more that you win. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. You pair that with just one more correct pick, and you are already cashing out. And some extra promos as well for Prize Picks for the big game. How about the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups? If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. So download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at Prize Picks. Run your game. I don't think I would trade up for Josh Simmons, Croc, and it's mostly just because of the knee injury. I don't think the 49ers should be in the business right now, and potentially not even if he's there for him at 11 to be drafting injured players with the way things have gone. We're not going to be privy to the combine medical checks and the rechecks. And if everything looks great, I don't have a problem with drafting him. But man, moving up to get a guy who's got a knee injury who might not be ready for the start of training camp is a little bit of a dicey proposition to me. And that's why like the trade down thing kind of resonates with me, because then Will Campbell is another one. It's like, okay, Will Campbell's healthy. What about Will Campbell? It's like, well, how long are his arms going to be at the combine? Is he truly going to be a tackle long-term? If he's maybe an inside guy, well, that kind of knocks him down a little bit. And then all of a sudden you just look at all these draft picks, and whether it's Mike Green, he's too small. Michael Williams, not enough production as a pass rusher. And like every prospect we look at, it's just like, there's just something there to where you like them. They're first round guys, but you're not like bowled over to take them that high. That's for me where it's just like, yeah, you know what? If someone wants to come get a guy, we'll move down a few spots. If Simmons is there, you draft him. I'm okay with that. But moving up for one of these guys is difficult. And I think that's why when we do our next group of prospects, Croc, it's going to be interesting because Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, that's our next group of prospects we're going to break down. Maybe those are the guys where we're like, okay, that's what we're talking about. Let's go up and get one of those guys. And so I'm really interested to dive into the film further on those three guys. If one of those guys starts to slip a little bit closer to pick 11 for the San Francisco 49ers. How about Patrick Surtain? Are cornerbacks making a comeback, Croc? Did I just see that Surtain is defensive player of the year this year?
Dude, I was excited. You would have think that he was a 40. You would have thought he was a 49er player. The way I'm like, oh, Surtain won defensive player of the year. Let's go. I'm team defensive backs all the time, and to see a guy he's been playing lights out since he got into the league, and to get recognized as the best defensive player in the league, I thought that was awesome. Especially playing on a team that decent. They did decent, but the defense had to do a lot of heavy lifting, and a lot of that was Patrick Surtain. So shout out to the young fella who was not my CB1 in his class. It was J.C. Horn, who has played well, but battled like these injuries. That's kind of like throwing him off course a little bit at times. And then I had Greg Newsome ahead of him. And then there was Surtain, where a lot of people just had Surtain number one, who terrific guy. And he's definitely been balling out since he stepped on the field at the NFL level.
Ween Son in the chat says Crocky used to say he preferred going up against taller wide receivers, but could prime Crocky lock up prime Juwan?
Hey, I don't want to disrespect Juwan Jennings. He's had a terrific career, a much better career than I ever could have imagined having. But he was the type of guys that I like going up against. It's the 5'10", 5'11", super quick, change of direction guys. Those are the guys that were a little bit harder for me. Someone who is considered a bigger defensive back at 6'2", 200 pounds. The guys like Juwan Jennings, 6'3", 6'4". I bring that on because for me now it's just, especially when you're Juwan Jennings and you're a 4'7" guy. So now you're not going to outrun me, right? Like there are some freaks with bigger guys like Juwan Jennings, Julio Jones, where it's just like, well, he's quick, he's fast, he's explosive. DK Metcalf had some of that as well, where he was quick, powerful off the line, then he can run by you. Juwan Jennings wasn't running by me, so they would have probably had to play him in the slot. If he was outside with me, I like myself in that matchup.
I love it. Who's a better trash talker? Were you a big trash talker?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can't tell by my Twitter when the games get going. Oh, I've always talked trash, man. But I think Juwan Jennings is the better one. To see how he's gotten under defensive back skin several times, and I think people know, how he's coming, and it still doesn't matter. Definitely, it's definitely him. It's definitely him. So, yeah, I love that about his game too. Give me a guy who's a trash talker. He's gonna bring a physicality. Heck, I wish I had some kids on my team like that right now that I'm coaching that could play and have the mindset of Juwan Jennings.
Gammon in the chat wants to know initial thoughts on Georgia safety Malachi Starks at pick 11. We just did Starks this week, so go back to that episode if you want the full scouting report there. Short story is I like Starks more than Croc. Croc wasn't super into drafting a safety as high as number 11 unless he just blew him away, and he didn't quite see Minkah Fitzpatrick in Malachi Starks. Did I get that right, Croc?
Or Derwin James.
Yeah.
Guys that went in that range that were some safeties where it's like, you got to have this guy. And I thought he was good. Don't get it twisted. Malachi Starks, good. 11, good.
Too rich.
And he's going in that range in mocks. So, but, yeah. Minkah was special, and everything about him was special, watching him coming out of Alabama. And he went like pick 11. And Derwin James, who was a special player, went after that.
I saw someone bring up the Lakers and trading for Myles Garrett in the chat. You brought up the Lakers earlier and the Luka trade. And first of all, you're trying to give too much credit to the GM of the Lakers, because how awesome would it be if the Browns just called the Niners and didn't call anybody else and was like, hey, you want Myles Garrett? Just give me a little something here,
Well, that's what Belichick did with Jimmy Garoppolo.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to keep him away from the Browns. I wonder if the Browns are still mad about that. Maybe they won't trade him to the Niners in that case. But did you hear that Myles Garrett had talked about his situation with LeBron? And it's not surprising that after talking with LeBron, he went public and demanded a trade, because like LeBron James is the Michael Jordan of getting yourself onto a new team. So that's probably the person to talk to about that. Notice I didn't say
LeBron knows a thing or two about kind of pushing either yourself or your teammates out of certain situations. So they're saying he didn't know anything about this Anthony Davis trade, but I don't know. LeBron, he's kind of had his hand on a lot of the moves that teams have made that he's been on. So I don't know if Myles Garrett has that kind of pull with the Cleveland Browns. Like right now, they're just like, we're not acknowledging it. But I think at some point, when one of your guys is kind of fed up, you gotta get what you can get out of that.
Rick says Garrett for Ayuk in a first. Yeah, so Ayuk already nixed the Browns thing last offseason, and Ayuk just just signed his new deal. So I'm sure there's tons of dead money, and you usually can't trade a guy right after you sign him. So I've seen a lot of people bring up Brandon Ayuk, and obviously with the restructure of Debo's contract, he's probably not somebody you can move immediately. I can't remember. I know you can cut somebody with a post June 1st designation. I don't think you can trade them though now with a post June 1st designation like you can when you cut them. So it's probably off the table for anything involving Debo Samuel because of the way his contract is. And look, teams always want, unless you're giving them a star player back, or a really young difference-making player, in which case the 49ers will want to keep that player. It's going to be draft picks if the 49ers trade for someone like Myles Garrett. It's going to be picks.
Yeah.
It's just the way the NFL trades go.
Especially with Cleveland. They got to figure out a way to rebuild.
Yeah. Well, they got to start.
And how you got to do something with this Deshaun Watson. Like, he's got to go.
Yeah.
And not because of the off the field stuff. Like, that was weird, of course. But he has just been bad.
He's been bad.
He has been a terrible quarterback. And that's the part where you can't have that.
There might be some, and again, I'm not a cap expert, but there might be some stuff with his latest, because he tore his Achilles again. So they might be able to get out of it in a way, or put him on a list where he's just like out of sight, out of mind. And he's like, his name is on the roster, but he's not really around the team. I think that's kind of the way it's going to go for Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns, until they can just completely get him off of the roster and then take the cap hit. And they might need to just take all their medicine now, because it's going to be rough for them cap wise to trade. It's going to be much better for the team trading for Myles Garrett than the Browns trading him away because of dead money in his contract. There is, the 49ers did dodge a huge Watson bomb, because I still believe that the 49ers were really interested in Deshaun Watson back in that January where all the weird stuff came out. Like, thank goodness that stuff came out before the 49ers went and made a trade, because it's entirely possible. That was the Stafford offseason. That was the offseason the Niners ended up trading up in the draft. Their plan A might have been Watson. And there were reports that there were conversations there about Deshaun Watson. And if all this stuff didn't come out in January, if it came out in February instead, and the 49ers had already traded for Deshaun Watson, wow, what kind of mess would that have been?
Well, let's say it never came out. Let's say none of that stuff ever happened. You still dodged a bullet because he's been so terrible. Now, has he been terrible because, he had to miss a season, then all the stuff, and maybe it got to his head? That could be the case. But this version of Deshaun Watson, there were conversations about Deshaun Watson. Who's better, him or Mahomes? Like, that was a real conversation a few years back. And now it's like, is there a worse starting quarterback in the NFL than Deshaun Watson?
That's insane.
And that's why the 49ers dodged the biggest bullet. Like, just aside from that stuff, would have been a PR nightmare, of course, for the Niners. How he has played, it's been terrible.
Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Appreciate everyone jumping in the live chat. We're going to do this at least once a week, do a little Q&A. Who knows, maybe even twice a week, because you guys enjoy it. We enjoy it. We get to filter through a bunch of topics on the San Francisco 49ers throughout the offseason with these live Q&A YouTube shows. And thanks, everybody, for listening first thing on Friday morning. If you're listening to this podcast, then maybe on your way to work, enjoy Super Bowl 59. I know it's not going to be the matchup that anybody wants out there, but Croc and I will be back, and we'll break down everything that happened in the Super Bowl and continue breaking down prospects, NFL draft, trade ideas, free agents, as well as we do here on Locked On 49ers.